my name is Ash. I am a certified strength and conditioning specialist of 8 or so years at this point, and I help athletes and trainees with their body composition and fat loss goals. Okay, so I'm gonna take you through the exact exercises and work that I do with my trainees to help them improve their RWF, or their relationship with food. All of the material comes straight from Food Freedom Foundations, which is available in July 2026. I have a plethora of videos breaking down why your relationship with food actually matters for all trainees, and I'll link those down below. But the short version of all of that is, without a positive relationship with food, or at least a decent one, it's nearly impossible to find a body composition that is actually sustainable for you year-round. If you get to a goal by being mean to yourself, I promise that the results won't last very long, because being mean to yourself is exhausting. Simply put, it is not your dream physique if it is a nightmare to maintain. Always remember that as you are going through this process. Okay, so one of the first exercises that we do in weeks 1 and 2 is non-numerical food logging. Okay, non-numerical is the key word here. Now, the reason why it is non-numerical is because I don't have you track your calories. In fact, if you spend any amount of time obsessing over caloric values or just numbers in general, this is specifically designed to give you a break from that while you continue to build awareness around your intake, because you probably already know how to track your food. What you likely don't know is how your food is actually making you feel, both physically and emotionally, and that's what this exercise is for. The reason why I have it in weeks number 1 and 2 is because this needs to last about 10 or so consecutive days. Otherwise, if you just do it for 3 days, you're not really getting much good information. What you guys can try to do in the way that we do in the course is to log your food without the calories. This means that you log how you feel before and after the meal. You can add a photo of your food. Sometimes you can add your mood and then also your environment. That would include where you're sitting, who you're with, is it daytime, is it nighttime? I also think that adding some rough quantities are really great as well, because then you can see if your meals are actually adequately sized, or whether you're having like 10 small little snacks or not. In the course itself, I have a template on the different types of variables that you can collect as data within the non-numerical food log. Again, ideally, you do this for about 10 to maybe 14 consecutive days before you move on to the next part. However, you can move on to the next section while you are in the process of this. It is not that big of a deal. During the second portion of this, and this is where it starts to get really interesting, I'm gonna have you guys deconstruct your personal food history and present. Okay, so this exercise is a lot of writing, it's a lot of journaling, and it's a lot of reflecting. If you don't have your own narrative kind of written down onto a piece of paper, it is much harder to actually target those specific problems. So in FFF, there are a series of very detailed journaling prompts that do this, and there are quite a few of them. So I'm just gonna give you a couple exercise examples of what we're working with here. So one of the exercises on the history side, were your earliest food memories positive? What were your family meals like growing up? Were you at the table, or were you together in front of the TV, or was everyone eating really separately? Were you given food as a reward for like good behavior, or was food taken away from you as like a punishment? On the present side, what roles does food serve in your life right now? Is it your primary source of pleasure? Do you cook for others as a way of showing care? Your holidays entirely planned around eating? Things like that. There's also one question that stumps a lot of people, and you're gonna have to spend a little bit more time on this, but do you have any existing food rules, and where or who do you think they came from? Here's my personal answer to give you a little bit of guidance on the level of depth that we're looking for. So one of my food rules for a long time was that I wasn't allowed to eat a full large meal after 8 p.m. And of course, I made this up in my head. If I ended up eating past 8, it had to be small, because I was eating at like the wrong time. So, if I look back on this, it probably came from years of reading like bad fitness content that demonized late night eating. And honestly, from watching a lot of the women around me growing up who would treat nighttime eating like it was something bad or shameful. And then whenever I broke this rule as a younger kid, I would feel a lot of guilt that would kind of bleed into the next morning. I would wake up feeling like I'd already started the day behind. It took me a long time to realize that that wasn't reality, And it was just a food rule that I absorbed so deeply that it kind of sounded like my own voice. Later on, in my early 20s, I had a food rule as a trainee that my carbs had to be earned. My best guess is that I also absorbed this from like generic fitness content over many years, maybe as like a result of like the low carb craze. I don't think it was any specific person who taught this to me. And that said, it still took me a long time to break that rule because it was so deeply ingrained. Okay, so that is my whole answer for just that one question about food rules. And that's the level of detail that we're going for. Not just, I don't eat carbs at night, but where did that come from? What happens? How does it feel when you break that rule? And, you know, obviously, is this something that you want to continue to abide by, assuming that the answer is no. Then in weeks 4, 5, we start to introduce some practical regulatory tools. One of the biggest regulatory tools that I've talked about a ton at this point is called the Anchor Meals. It is available actually as a separate free download in the link below. So Anchor Meals are meals that are intentionally satisfying enough to stabilize both physical hunger and mental preoccupation with food. And the goal of establishing your anchor meals is not some kind of like perfection or like clean eating, but rather to create consistency and adequacy earlier in the day. And that way you can stop arriving at the nighttime feeling physiologically and psychologically underfed. You know, a lot of people think that they have like a nighttime willpower problem when in reality, they've usually spent the entire day under eating, over caffeinating, or like rushing through meals, standing over a sink, or just like trying to white knuckle their hunger signals into submission. And obviously not very sustainable, not really great for your relationship with food. Another major tool that I have inside of FFF is called the circuit breaker. And so the circuit breaker is actually a decision-making framework for moments where you feel out of control, out of food, like you can't stop having another bite, another bite, another bite. So instead of relying on shame or self-discipline, it helps you identify actually what's happening in real time. So as kind of like an immediate exercise I can pass on to you guys, I would say that you can ask yourself the following questions the next time that you feel really out of control around food. Those questions are, number 1, are you physically hungry? Did you underfuel carbohydrates earlier in the day? Did you train extremely hard and not fully recover? Are you emotionally overwhelmed? Are you exhausted? Are you reacting to restriction rather than actual hunger? The answers to these questions actually really matter a lot because most people will kind of immediately moralize that moment of feeling out of control by being like, oh, I'm so lazy, I'm so undisciplined, whatever it is, instead of investigating it with a little bit of curiosity. If you are able to slow down and ask yourself those questions, you're able to create a little bit more distance between yourself and what's happening around you. Let me give you an example of when you might use something like this. So it's 10:30 p.m. You feel like you've already blown your diet because you had like a scoop of ice cream after dinner. And so now you're standing in the kitchen eating cereal directly out of the box while simultaneously promising yourself that you will start over and be better tomorrow. So this would be a great moment to ask yourself all of those questions, right? And so like a lot of people would respond to a moment like this by trying to tighten control even harder the next day. You know, more restriction, more rules, less food, more compensation. But what the circuit breaker does within FFF is to teach you how to interrupt this cycle before it becomes another week, another month, or like another year of fighting yourself. I don't want you to have to keep fighting yourself because the fighting is where all of the mental exhaustion is. Instead of asking, how do I become more disciplined? We ask, what system created this moment in the first place, and how do we change that environment and system? Within weeks 4 and 5, there's also something inside called the sweet tooth diagnostic, which helps a lot of trainees determine whether a sweet craving is coming from hunger or habit or emotional regulation, restriction backlash, or simple enjoyment. All of those I just listed are completely different experiences and have different roots and therefore can require different responses. I can't tell you how many times people think that they have like a sweet tooth when in reality they're just like generally undercarbed and they don't really know it. The other thing that we have in weeks 5 and 6 are language revisions. Okay. Language revisions are probably arguably the most important part of this entire course. And it's probably the one that's going to take the longest, which is why I have 6+ weeks. You don't have to obviously keep on referring to the material after 6 weeks, but this language revision is something that can take many weeks, months, or for some people even years if they don't catch it in themselves. So language revision is something that almost no one talks about within fitness-oriented nutrition spaces. This is the literal language you use towards yourself around food. And in one of the assignments, I have trainees identify 3 recurring negative thought patterns that they have around food and eating behaviors, and then I have them rewrite it using a more neutral and compassionate language. When I say compassionate language, I'm not talking about fake positivity. I'm just talking about something that is factually accurate and non-violent. So instead of, I have no willpower, I always ruin my diets on weekends no matter what. So the words always is really extreme, and saying that you have no willpower is kind of insulting yourself and very unhelpful. If we take the statement, we can revise it to, maybe weekends are more challenging for me because my routine changes. I can plan ahead next time so that I can change the outcome. And so this little revision might sound small, but it matters enormously because you are your thoughts. And if your thoughts are constantly nonstop self-deprecating, you're gonna stay stuck in that loop. Your brain responds very differently to, I failed again, versus something about this environment makes consistency harder for me. Because here you're just like, well, this is it, this is determined, I'm a failure, versus, oh, it's the environment, I can probably change my environment, right? One creates shame while the other encourages problem solving and is just a lot more factually accurate. As a friendly reminder, shame is a terrible, terrible long-term behavior change strategy. It might create like short bursts of compliance, but over time, it tends to increase avoidance, emotional eating, all or nothing thinking, and eventually burnout. Another assignment in this section, and another assignment that you can do right now, is to see if you can identify fear and shame-based language around food in general. So this is where people usually realize just how aggressive and sometimes mean their inner dialogue actually is. Maybe they make negotiating statements like, oh, if I eat this now, I could just run it off later. Or I weighed too much this morning, so I'm gonna skip breakfast. Or I feel disgusting and gross today, so I just don't eat because I don't deserve food. Or just, I'm so lazy. Statements like that. Once you start to make a list of all of those statements and you see it out in front of you, that's the key part here, guys. You have to see it out in front of you. You're gonna be like, oh my God, I can't believe I speak to myself this way. I would never speak to a friend this way. How could I speak to myself this way? You see, a lot of people think that like self-criticism and self-insults are what keeps them accountable. But like I said earlier, it creates fear and shame. But if fear and shame were actually effective long-term motivators, most chronic dieters would have found peace with food years ago, and no one would have such a hard time with this. Instead, what usually happens is people will oscillate between hyper control and hypervigilance and then exhaustion. So people will have like this extreme rigidity Monday through Thursday, as if your body could somehow tell the difference in days. And then there's like this exhaustion that happens around Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and that lends itself to things like cheat meals and letting loose. And then, Sunday night comes around and you feel like shit, and then restarting on Monday again for like the 10th time. Part of what FFF does is that it helps people recognize that the voice in their head that's always screaming at them is not objectively true. A lot of it is inherited language from diet culture, family systems, mom and dad, sports environments, social media, old coaching experiences, or maybe just like years of trying to force compliance through self-punishment. Once you identify the language, once you have it down in front of you, which again, I highly recommend that you do right now if you want to, you can finally start to interrupt it. You cannot build a sustainable relationship with food, and you cannot build a sustainable body composition while speaking to yourself like you're a problem to fix. So very importantly, FFF is not just like, I give you these exercises, hope you feel better someday. I give trainees clear markers for what improvement in your relationship with food actually looks like in real life. All of those are actually discussed in this video over here. One of the hardest parts about healing your relationship with food is that the first signs of progress are all psychological before they turn physical. Also, not to mention, most people are used to measuring progress through weight or calories or some other kind of numerical data. But relationship with food improvements usually show up first in your attention, in your emotional regulation, in your flexibility, and just the amount of mental space food preoccupies, and that's a little bit harder to measure. So yes, this was a video promoting FFF, but at the same time, I just gave you a couple of the most important exercises that you can do to finally achieve a body composition that you are proud of, in the sense that you got there by prioritizing your sanity and your happiness first. What the course offers is privately listed, reiterative, exclusive video content of me coaching you through that you can kind of follow along at your own pace. It's also organized in a stepwise paced schedule, and it's designed to keep you on track and to not feel overwhelmed by all of the material. So You have all the information that you need. The course is just gonna allow you to actually execute it. Please, please, please try these exercises. They are going to benefit you more than I can describe with my mouth. They're gonna benefit you more than you could ever imagine with your relationship with food, and you're just gonna be a much more self-aware, at peace person, and you're gonna be able to achieve your goals in a much more sustainable way. I hope this was helpful. I'll see you in the next one.